Sup guys, I'm new to the scene and just wanted to try out the whole YouTube stick and to share some interesting fanfictions I found and tell me in the comments or a rating from 1 to 10. Alright. He placed the cold wet patch of paper onto his skin and pressed in there tightly for a few seconds. It was something he had done hundreds of times, an act that he had perfected, so much that he could do it flawlessly 10,000 times without a single slip-up. He peeled off the paper and examined his handiwork. You can do this. A small caricature of All Might rested on his arm for a few moments before it began to move around, still flexing and smiling like nothing was wrong in the world. A few seconds later, a small fiery Endeavor head appeared and began to breathe fire at it. For once, would you two not? Izuku asked his quirk. It happened every time he applied the cheap sticker tattoos he could pick up from the toy store for a yen. Endeavor would always try to start a fight with All Might, and the other pro heroes wouldn't help. Whoa, another UA applicant said. Another person that had come to the bathroom to prepare themselves for the practical exam. He had spiked red hair and just as red eyes and had punched himself in the face the moment he walked into the bathroom. That's pretty wild, dude. Is that your quirk? Yeah. Izuku nodded and gave a light smile. He summoned the stickered version of Endeavor who gave a light pout at not being able to torment All Might anymore. I'm a living mural. Any art that gets put on my skin becomes alive and I can summon them. And kind of control them. Whoa, that beats my hardening by a mile. The redhead held up his hand and turned his arm into a jagged rock-like substance that looked like it was hard, which was something that Izuku considered pretty useful. But, why are you just putting on those sticker tattoos? Wouldn't you be better off with something manly? Like an actual tattoo of like a tiger or a shark. Something manly. Leave it to a stranger to start pouring salt on an old wound that never stopped festering. You're right, I'd love to get an actual tattoo. My quirk is stronger the larger and more detailed something is. He felt like it actually being permanent would help a lot too, but he hadn't had the ability to actually prove that yet. But, it's my mom. She won't let me get a tattoo. The redhead winced. That's a bummer, dude. Well, hopefully you get in, you seem like a cool dude. He extended his hand and gave a great big cheerful smile. A quirk that's all about tattoos is manly as hell. I'm Ajiro Kirishima by the way. Izuku Midoriya. Izuku grabbed his hand and took in a deep breath. I hope so too, best of luck out there. You too man, and is that normal? Ajiro pointed towards Izuku's sides where a miniature Hawks and Maruko were fighting it out. Yep. He let out a long sigh and then smiled. They kind of have a mind of their own, they'll do what I tell them, but they still have their own personalities. Radical. Who the hell still uses that word? So, what happens when you wash them off? Do they die? Izuku glanced at the temporary tattoos currently running amok on his body. I have no idea. 4x. Ever since he had first put on an All Might sticker tattoo during Katsuki's 5th birthday, and it came to life to punch Katsuki in the face, Izuku had known that temporary tattoos weren't strong. They were incredibly weak. A light tap could destroy them, and they could barely even do any damage. Endeavor could boil water eventually, Hawks could maybe cause a paper cut, Maruko's kicks were a bit like having a wad of paper thrown at him, and All Might. All Might just flexed. Izuku watched as his tattoos along with his hopes and dreams were completely and utterly crushed underneath the smallest possible robot he could have found. Given that it was still the size of a car, it wasn't all that small, but there was absolutely nothing that his pathetic little temporary tattoos could do about it. Fuck. Izuku shouted, and pulled out a Sharpie from his pants. A desperation move in every sense, he dragged the marker along his extended arm and ended the tip with a sharp-looking arrow. Permanent marker was just about the only thing that gave credence to his quirk being stronger the more permanent the marking was. In the case of anything drawn with a Sharpie, he could use it as a weapon that was about as solid as something made of metal. With another roar, Izuku tossed a poorly drawn spear towards the robot. As expected, it bounced off. The robot turned towards him, its lone red light acting like an eye. Was he going to die in the UA entrance exams? The robot sped towards him, its armor-plated body ready to crush him. He flinched and waited for pain. Instead, he heard the sound of metal bending and tearing. He opened his eyes and saw a girl wearing a blue tracksuit. She was in his group. Her long orange hair tied in a ponytail had made her stand out. Izuku's first thought was that she was cute and had that mystical girl next door property he had heard so much about. And watching her rip apart a robot he couldn't even dent with her giant hands only caused a single thought to enter his head. This was his mother's fault. Hey! The orange-haired girl jumped down, and her hands shrank down to normal size. Are you okay? I heard you scream. Is it because you lost your shirt? Izuku let out a sigh, and scratched the back of his head. No, it's just easier to use my quirk when I'm shirtless. I'm just coming to terms with the fact that my quirk isn't strong enough to do anything. Oh, her shoulders slumped and she looked down the street. Well, your All Might thingy is cute, anyways, I gotta go. Good luck. And with that, she was off running. A moment later, the sound of her tearing apart another mech could be heard. His Mirko tattoo walked over to him and hugged his leg, her large red eyes almost making her look adorable. Congrats, I'm going to wash you last. 4x. There were a dozen other things he should have done besides go home. He'd just end up being annoyed if he went there, and angry, so angry at his mother. He should have gone for a run, he should have gone to the gym, he should have gone over to Katsuki's and watched him gloat about how many robots he destroyed. But, part of him wanted to go home. He wanted to get angry at her. And he should be. She was the one to break the promise, not him. If he got good grades in high school. If he was at the top of his class. If he applied to Tokyo U. If he had done everything she asked, then he could get a tattoo. He had jumped through those loops. He had worked so hard to get his grades, he had worked so hard to study, and harder still to train to become a hero. But, that promise was broken. He stared at the door to their apartment for a few moments. It wasn't too late. He could turn away now and avoid the coming fight. He could go cool off. The doorknob was cold enough to burn. The scent of his favorite meal greeted him and made his stomach twist as the memory of that meal instantly soured in his mind. Why was she making his favorite food today? Why not last night? Why not tomorrow? But today, the day that he failed to get into UA because she refused to let him get a tattoo. Because she broke her promise. He slammed the door behind him, mostly on accident, and took his shoes off. Izuku. His mother popped her head out of the kitchen, but her smile died when she saw him. She wiped her hands on her apron as she looked towards the ground. How'd it go? How do you think? He plopped his shoes off and tried not to yell at her, tried not to blame this all on her. He could understand her not wanting him to get a tattoo at his age. He knew that the laws made it so that minors were prohibited from getting a tattoo, but there were exceptions. He just needed his mother's permission. It was for his quirk. That you tried your hardest. She met his eyes again and gave him a big smile. Tried his hardest. How could he try his hardest when he wasn't allowed to use his quirk? He had to use a Sharpie to draw the equivalent of a sharp stick on his arm to get any real results. The stupid sticker tattoos he had were worthless. How the fuck could he try his hardest when she broke her promise? Izuku took in a deep breath and walked past her, his entire body tensing as he ground his teeth. He missed not being so angry all the time. But every single time he saw his mother, he couldn't help but feel betrayed and manipulated. That's why she was cooking his favorite meal. To calm him down. A letter came. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a white envelope. A big red U was stamped onto the front. Tokyo U. The school she wanted him to go to. It's for you. I thought you could use a bit of good news. It was still sealed. At least she still respected his privacy. He nearly tore it from her hands and ripped the envelope open. The fact that this was an acceptance letter to one of the top colleges in Tokyo did absolutely nothing to cheer him up. He shoved the letter back into her hand. Congratulations. I got accepted to your school. He tried to walk away, tried to get back to his room where he could lock the door and brood in peace. But she spoke up. Izuku. She stomped her foot and flailed the letter at him. This is a big deal. You'll be able to go to college, get a good job, a good, safe job and... I don't want a good safe job. He spun on his heel and towered over her. I don't want to be whatever it is that you want me to be. I want to be a hero. And to do that all I needed was a tattoo. That's all. It could have been on my back. It could have been on my legs. It could have been hidden so that it could only be seen when I was doing hero work. But because you broke our promise, I couldn't get one. You're the reason why I failed to get into UA, and I'm the reason why I got into Tokyo U. She started to cry. It wasn't the first time he had made her cry. It wouldn't be the last. He turned, taking a few steps away from her and towards his room. All you had to do was support me. Izuku. He could hear the sound of her breaking down once again. He found himself with zero sympathy for her. He tried to understand her. He tried to make sure that she understood him. He was clear with his intentions. She was not. She made zero effort to actually understand him. Hell, she went out of her way to misunderstand him. The dinner he ate that night was cold. 4x. Izuku. A light knock came from his door. A pounding lack of sleep roared through his mind, and a flash of anger greeted him when he pushed it away. He spent so much time last night just being angry. His sketchbook was filled with designs for his tattoos he'd get the moment he could. His artistic skill was lacking, which was why he just had rough drafts of what he wanted. He had a plan to get a tattoo. With or without his mother's permission. Once he was 18, he'd be able to travel on his own, and then he could get a tattoo whenever he wanted. Which was right now. That was 5 months to save up for a ticket, and the cost of the tattoo. A decent part-time job would help. I wanted to wait for this weekend so we could go shopping together, but she trailed off. She always trailed off when she wanted him to feel guilty over something. I left some money in front of your door. Please use it to buy school supplies, and some new clothes. You've earned it. And another pause. I love you. He heard his mother shuffle away, and then a few minutes later the apartment door closed. Izuku rushed towards the door, and found the Tokyo U envelope just sitting on the ground, bulging with a healthy amount of cash. It wasn't enough for a ticket. And even if he did just keep it, she'd probably ask to see what he'd bought. He might be able to save some of it though. It was a start. But he might be able to convince someone to give him a tattoo with this money. Look, kid, the slender woman with dark red hair and amber-colored eyes scratched the back of her head as she looked at him. This was the 5th tattoo shop that he had been to today, and it was the 5th one that was about to turn him down. I get your sob story right, but that's just all the more reason why I gotta say it's a no-go. Izuku let his hands slide off the counter. The money his mother had given him for new clothes was burning a hole in his pocket like no tomorrow. He should have known that every single place would have refused him, and it wasn't like he'd be able to get a tattoo today since he'd have to make an appointment first. Besides, what was the point? He couldn't unfail the entrance exam. The woman continued, flipping her hand around and exposing the beautiful tattoo of a female samurai on her arm that had drawn Izuku in. I'm sure that every single artist would love to work on you. What makes you say that? He looked around the room for a moment. It was clean, as the classification of tattoos being a medical procedure made the few parlors in Tokyo as clean as a hospital. Numerous photos of tattoos decorated the room, and an entire binder of designs sat ready for people to browse through. The woman snorted and laughed. Are you kidding, kid? Do you have any idea how many tattoo artists would love to watch their artwork come to life? Shit, just thinking about it gets me all kinds of fired up. I'd pour my heart and soul into that piece. She stretched her arms wide and spun on her stool. Every single one of these would look like amateur hour. With her tattooed back towards him, he could see the intricate workings of something amazing on her back. Her arms fell and she let out a low and annoyed hiss. But that's part of the problem, yeah. I put my best work on you, and you start trying to be a hero, and people are going to start asking where you got it. That leads them back to me, and then I lose my license. Bitterness and disappointment did not make for a good mood. A flash of anger tore through him, and made the fact that he hadn't eaten yet send a wave of weakness over him. He nearly stumbled but stood strong. Oh, well, what if I had my mother's permission? I'd consider it, but even with a parent's permission, it's still illegal, you know. But, maybe it'd be fine if you became a hero. She waved her hand and then grabbed one of her cards. But, like, legit, when you turn 20, show up and I'll give you the biggest deal of the century. Izuku took her card and looked at it for a few moments. There was no way he was going to hold onto this for 2 whole years. Thanks, but, do you really not know anyone that would at least be willing to talk? She pouted slightly and kicked her leg against her desk. She gave a light wince and rubbed her knee. Anyone that has a license isn't going to be too keen on risking it. She scratched the back of her head and let out a sigh. I don't really know anyone that would. Another card. Another dead end. Why did everything feel 2 years away at this point? Well, thanks. Oi. A low, hiss-like sound drew Izuku's focus towards the door, and there he saw a devil in a maroon suit. The man's smooth red skin would make him stand out in any crowd. He also had 2 red horns that stuck out several inches from his forehead, black slicked back hair, and a soured look on his face. He looked like a real demon. When it comes to quirks, there was a wide range for what humans could look like. Izuku's homeroom teacher was basically a polar bear, but still, this guy just looked terrifying. He had an aura that choked the air with fear. Oi! The red-skinned man walked forward, hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped forward, and his lower jaw protruding ever so slightly due to the 2 tusk-like teeth. Oi! 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 That was at least 3 too many ois. Izuku took a step back and watched the man for a few seconds. A few of the buttons on his dress shirt were undone, showing off the ink on his chest. A customer. Oh, the woman behind the counter stood back ever so slightly. Can I help you with anything? The red-skinned man placed both hands onto the desk and took in a deep breath. His voice was like the crackling of coals in the middle of a summer campfire. Maybe, you the artist? Yes. The woman sounded very unsure about her profession. Good. Now then, I have a very important question to ask. The red-skinned man's broad shoulders rose as he took in a deep breath. What inspires you? Like, for tattoos and shit. Hell, art in general. The red-skinned man placed a fist down onto the table. It almost looked like a beast was trying to be a man with how aggressive he was acting. Like, what do you do when you've lost that inspiration and shit? What gets you excited to do what you do? Well, I mean, it's my job. The woman let out a low breath, visibly relaxing for a few seconds. Most of the time, the customer knows what they want and I just draw that. It doesn't really require inspiration. Okay, but what if that doesn't work? What then? She shrugged. I take a vacation. Bah, none of that shit's good. The red-skinned man pushed off the counter and waved his hand. He rolled his shoulders and gave a short nod. Thanks for your time. Despite the brief hint of relief Izuku felt when the man walked out of the building, Izuku found himself stumbling forward. His voice was caught in his throat for just a moment, and the fatigue from skipping lunch was catching up to him, but still he pressed forward. Hey! He shouted louder than he intended. Wait. The red-skinned man glared at him. What you want, Greenbean? I've been looking for someone to give me a tattoo all day, but I'm underaged. Why the fuck should I care? The red-skinned man walked towards him again. He wasn't exactly looming over Izuku, but he was still more than a few inches taller than Izuku's own 5 feet 8 inches. She can't even ink other members, this ain't no charity case. No, wait, you're not understanding. Izuku held up his hand like he was trying to push the man back. It's my quirk. A single bushy black eyebrow told Izuku to get to the point. My quirk, it makes stuff drawn on me come to life, that's why I. The growl of his stomach ended his sentence. The red-skinned man pointed towards a nearby ramen shop. You wanna talk about it over some ramen? 4x. So you mean to tell me that? The red-skinned man picked up the large bowl of ramen and began slurping like he had come crawling out of some anime, only without the mess. When he placed the bowl down, there was a noodle that had gotten wrapped around one of his tusks which he quickly slurped up. You tried to be a hero but couldn't cause you didn't have a tattoo. And that you couldn't get a tattoo because of the strict laws, and a strict mother. That's fucking bullshit. Oh, they still haven't introduced themselves yet. despite the red-skinned man having polished off nearly 2 bowls of ramen already. Wait, was he going to have to pay for this? Izuku, Izuku said with a smile and looked at his own nearly finished bowl of ramen. Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya. The red-skinned man's eyes went wide for a moment. Yeah, Izuku raised an eyebrow in response. It wasn't every day that someone reacted to his last name like that. The red-skinned man shook his head and rolled his shoulders. It's nothing. Anyways, I'm Tanaka Yamato. Nice to meet you. Tanaka grunted and leaned forward onto the table, signaling for another bowl of ramen. I do just have to ask though. Why do you still want a tattoo? I mean, a place like UA isn't going to give you a retest or anything, right? So like, why not just wait? Because, Izuku bit his lip. Tanaka had a point. Why did he feel so desperate to get a tattoo right now? Was it because he felt like he was owed one? Was he just frustrated that he failed? Why? Because, he repeated and stared at the ceramic bowl that had just been placed in front of Tanaka. He clenched his fist and then sighed. I don't know. I guess. I just want to know if I could have made it. You want to test your limits. I can dig it. Tanaka began to devour his third bowl of ramen with some loud slurping action. That's what I do every chance I get. But, another question. The bowl was half empty when it was placed down, and Tanaka gave Izuku a glare that on anyone else would have looked like a pout, but on Tanaka it looked like Izuku was half a syllable away from losing a limb. How does this help me? Izuku felt his voice crack just by drawing in a breath. Well, everywhere I've gone, they all talked about how much they wanted to tattoo me. That the idea of seeing their work come to life was an inspiration. So, I don't know, maybe it'd be the same for whoever it is you're trying to help. Tanaka leaned back in his seat and crossed his arms, his yellow eyes closing while he stroked his chin. I'm not the artsy type, so I really wouldn't know how this inspiration stuff works, but I've been trying to get her inspired for a while now. I got her a computer, a bunch of paint stuff, and even a giant brush, but all she uses that for is whacking me upside the head. So far, nothing's really worked. Izuku hummed and nodded along to what Tanaka was saying. Can I ask about her? Who? The girl you're trying to inspire. Oh, right, my little sister. Ori. Tanaka leaned forward with a great big smile on his face. She's the best tattoo artist in all of Japan. It's her quirk or something. I'm not 100% sure about what's going on with everything she does, but she's unlike any other artist out there. Here, let me show you. He undid a few more buttons of his dress shirt and revealed a tattoo he had on his chest. Rich vibrant colors, exquisite details, and a powerful design made the dragon on Tanaka's chest look like it wasn't a tattoo but a painting, or a still frame from a high-budget anime. That tattoo was everything Izuku had ever wanted. Something that looked powerful, that looked solid, that looked like it was already alive. He could picture the dragon curling around his arm, a faint, almost unnoticeable sensation as it roamed around his skin, and the peeling sensation as the dragon launched from his arm attacking some unnamed foe. That's amazing. Right, she's so talented. She's inked most of the other guys too, but she put her best work on me, even if my skin isn't exactly easy to work with. Apparently, the dragon is supposed to protect me or something. Tanaka shrugged and buttoned up his shirt once again. There's a big one on my back too, it's an Oni mask. Tanaka gestured towards his face and gave a toothy smile. Not that I need a mask, am I right? If it helps, you're the nicest Oni I've ever met. Izuku gave a small shrug. Tanaka let out a short laugh and slapped his knee. Have you even met another Oni? Nope, but I had a crush on a tanuki before. Another fit of laughter escaped Tanaka. Alright Izuku, I think you might just be worth a shot. What do you say? Want to come with me and see if my sister will ink you? The answer was obvious. 4x. There were several indicators of wealth and power in Tokyo, one of which was using land in an inefficient way, especially in the center of a bustling commercial area. There were few things as inefficient as a traditional Japanese compound, complete with its own patch of forest woven into the concrete jungle that surrounded it. A large high fence that could almost be called a castle wall surrounded much of the compound, with a few buildings reaching 2 or more stories in height. It felt like that time his class went on a field trip to Edo Castle. Only there was one big difference. The people. A thrumming sense of nausea overtook him as he had followed Tanaka halfway across Tokyo into the heart of the Amagi district. The more he looked at Tanaka, the less he looked like a demon, and the more Izuku could see him for what he really was, Yakuza. When Izuku was still little, All Might and the police led what might have been a purging of the former kings of the underworld. After being designated as villains, many Yakuza groups fell. Others simply vanished. There were still a few groups rumored to have survived, closely watched by the police, and treated as something of a historic artifact. All right, Izuku. Tanaka placed a red hand on Izuku's shoulder and nodded towards the gate which had two men standing guard in front of it. They were dressed similarly to Tanaka, and even had some of his gruff disposition. Ori's in there. Just do me a favor and keep your head down and try not to look too many people in the eye. And if anyone gives you shit, you tell them you're my guest. Oh, good. So you're a higher up. Nah, I'm just the muscle, but they'll still respect me if I say you're for Ori. Why was Ori sounding more and more like some horrific beast he was about to be sacrificed to? Izuku nodded and swallowed his fears. If he ran now, they'd probably chase him, then he'd be all kinds of screwed. He was just here to see if some crazy Yakuza guy's crazy sister would be crazy enough to give him a tattoo. On the plus side, he could just say that he was kidnapped by the Yakuza and they robbed him and then forced him to get a tattoo. No, he wasn't going to lie like that. If he got a tattoo, he was going to tell his mother that he got it. Hopefully willingly. Yo, one of the guys at the door raised a hand. Tanaka, I swear you get uglier every time I see ya. You didn't get into any fights today, did you? I told you so. Tanaka scratched the back of his head and then gestured towards Izuku. I was out looking for inspiration for Ori. Sho glanced over towards Izuku. The cigarette in his mouth and the tight fit of his suit made him look like one of those classical high-up Yakuza members. That raised the question of why someone like him was guarding the door. This kid's the inspiration. Yeah, his quirk is wild. Just wait, Ori's going to be so excited. Tanaka, my man, you didn't kidnap this kid, did you? 'Cause Granny ain't going to like that if you did. What? Tanaka took a step back and looked at Izuku. No, he's here because he wants a tattoo. I mean, I even bought him ramen and stuff. This isn't a kidnapping. Besides, he's like 17. I'm kidding Tanaka, sheesh. Anyways, just make sure he doesn't cause any trouble. Sho waved his hand and took back his position of leaning against the wall. They passed without incident through the first gate that led to a long, thin courtyard surrounded on all sides by high walls. On the other end was another gate, the actual main entrance to the compound. Tonka led Izuku through the main courtyard before they turned towards a garden, complete with a well-maintained koi pond. This place felt like it was far too nice to belong to the Yakuza. Maybe they just all worked for that granny person Sho mentioned. And she just really liked Yakuza aesthetics. Maybe she was the wife of one of the leaders that got taken out. There were so many questions buzzing through Izuku's head, and answers seemed far too dangerous to get. They arrived at a small house, separate from the main building, but larger than his mother's apartment. Oi, Tanaka shouted as they approached the building. Sis, I got a surprise for you. The sound of bottles banging and a few curse words echoed from inside the building before the front door opened. What the hell do you want, dumbass? Of all the things Izuku had been expecting Ori to be, attractive was not on the list. With the exception of her pale horns, there was very little that made Izuku believe that Ori was related to Tanaka. The summer yukata she had on in the middle of winter was half falling off of her body, revealing her pale smooth skin in far more places than Izuku would have thought possible. A traditional white chest binding preserved her modesty as one sleeve of her dress dangled uselessly at her side. The edge of a tattoo could be seen on the top of her shoulder and a bit on her upper arm as well. Her right thigh was exposed, revealing the top part of a cherry blossom tattoo that appeared just as lifelike as the dragon on Tanaka's chest. The sharpness of her lone blue eye seemed to stand out amidst her long snow-white hair that was tied into a wild ponytail held in place by several large pins, somehow concealing her left eye from him. On her cheek was the kanji for dumbass, and the still wet brush in her hand was the most likely culprit. The scowl she wore on her face seemed like it was simply meant to be there. She basically looked like the insanely beautiful girlfriend of a Yakuza member, and she probably wasn't the sane one in the relationship. Ori glared at him for just a single second before glaring even harder at Tanaka, the wet paintbrush in her hand ready to be flailed around like a deadly weapon. What the hell are you shouting for, dumbass? I was this close to coming up with something to paint. Is that why she had, dumbass, on her cheek? And who the hell is this? Izuku found himself facing the moist end of the brush. Oh, well, I was trying to figure out how to inspire you. Tanaka scratched the back of his head, and the image of the gruff Yakuza muscle that Izuku had first seen was completely replaced by a bone-headed and doting brother. And I found Izuku. I don't care who he is. Ori pointed the brush at her brother again. Why the hell didn't you call? We have cell phones. Just because your skull is twice as thick as normal doesn't mean your brain is any smaller. Actually, it is, Tanaka answered proudly. Remember, we got those X-rays. Ori's arm fell and her face took on a slightly sour look of defeat. She let out a sigh and looked towards Izuku again. Alright, kid. Why was everyone calling him kid? Why the hell would you follow someone that looks like that? She gestured towards her brother, and then towards the compound in general, into a place that couldn't be more clearly labeled Yakuza. Because, she looked him up and down, I don't think you have what it takes. The fact that Ori had at least an inch or two on him, without her horns, became very important, in large part thanks to her smug look that was amplified by her single visible eye, especially with how deep of a blue it was. I came because I want a tattoo, Izuku said firmly. If it was some scary Yakuza guy or Tanaka, he might have been a bit more gentle, but there was something about the smug condescending nature of Ori that was driving him crazy. Oh, Ori crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow. And what makes you think I'll just give you a tattoo? Because you'll want to. Izuku rolled up his sleeve and presented his arm to her. Want? Ori let out a laugh. What makes you think I'll want to ink you up? There are plenty of other people I give a shit about that would make a better canvas than you. Why would I waste my quirk on you? Shorty. Izuku winced at the term. It wasn't that 5 feet 8 inches was short, but that Ori and Tanaka were simply tall. Hell, Izuku was pretty sure he was taller than Sho, and he was the guy that guarded the front gate. He let out a deep breath and then looked at her brush. My quirk can make the things drawn on me real. Bullshit. Ori spat, glaring at him. She looked at her brother for a moment. Is this why you brought him here? Well, yeah, he sounded desperate, and I figured that something like that would get you excited. Tanaka flailed his arm around. I mean, it sounds cool, right? Just imagine like a dragon coming out of him. He'd be like that panda in that movie we like to watch. Did you see it happen? Ori shook her head and rolled her eye. You have a brush, Izuku pointed towards her hand. Why don't you draw on my arm? She looked at her brush, and then looked at his arm. With 2 quick stomps that caused her bound chest to bounce more than a bit, she stood in front of him and grabbed onto his arm. Fine, but I'm going to draw a dick. Why? Do I look like I'm mature enough to not draw a penis on some cocky brat? Well, she did have, dumbass, on her cheek. Her brushstrokes were smooth, even, and fluid. In a single motion, he had a crudely drawn penis on his arm. Well, Ori whacked his arm with her brush again. When's it going to work? Half of him was tempted to take the dick off his arm and tell her to go fuck herself. With a sigh, Izuku grabbed the penis and held it up off his arm. Silence. Well, so you're laminated, big deal. I've seen YouTube videos like that. Ori remained unconvinced. Is that all it does? Tanaka's shoulders slumped. Man, now you're making me look like a chump in front of my sister. I thought you were cool, Izuku. Now I see why you failed the UA entrance exam. He should have done this from the start. He tossed the dick behind him and grabbed one of his temporary tattoos. He still had a dozen or so left from the exam. Lick, splat, press, peel. A flexing All Might showed up on his arm, faded as hell thanks to how poorly he applied the temporary tattoo. Once again, he was greeted with silence as All Might moved on his arm, flexing and acting like an arrogant asshole, just like he always did, only this silence was in awe. See? He asked and then forced all might off of his skin. The small tattoo version fell off of his arm and looked more than a little stunned at everything. This is what my quirk really does. This is just a crappy temporary tattoo that I put on with my spit, so he's a bit weak. But the better the tattoo is, the stronger they are. Well? He asked, holding his arms out wide. The look on Ori's face told him that while he might not regret working with her, that didn't mean the process was going to be pleasant. Tanaka, she said in a very pleased voice. You're a great older brother, now go hang out with the others. She grabbed Izuku's bare arm and pulled him towards her. He caught a glimpse of her left eye when her chest met his, a slight red glow filtering out from beneath her snowy hair. I feel inspired. Hey, alright, good luck Izuku, you're going to need it. Luck never was one of Izuku's strong suits. In a whirl of white-haired chaos, Izuku found himself tossed inside that small traditional-style house. He was sent spinning, his coat and then his shirt promptly tossed to the side, and his shoes had somehow come off before he hit the tatami-matted room. The inside of the house looked like it belonged to Ori. Art supplies rested on every piece of furniture, and dozens of empty canvases sat waiting to be used, while many more only had black, angry marks that occasionally looked like curse words. The door clicked shut, and Izuku turned to see Ori looking at him. She looked hungry. A wide smile dominated her face, distorting the dumbass on her cheek, and the dim light of the room made her red eye all the more apparent. She pulled out the pins in her hair, letting it down before she gathered it up into a ponytail that would stay out of the way that revealed her pointed ears. If it wasn't for the fact that she looked like a yandere character, it might have been erotic. Actually, it was. It was very erotic. Congratulations, little boy, Ori all but purred as she walked over to him, a small needle appearing in her hand. You got what you wanted, you're going to be my canvas. Stop calling me little boy, I'm almost 18. Whatever, she waved her hand at him. I'll call you a man when I feel like it. Now lay down unless you want to be here all night. She paused and gave him a smug smile. I'm sure that's the first time a girl ever said that to you. Despite the fact that she was right, it was still easy to be offended by that. You're kind of a bitch, aren't you? She shrugged again and walked over to the wall where she flipped the light switch off, bathing the room in only what little natural light came from outside. You'll be calling me worse soon enough, but once we're done you'll be thanking me. Why? Because when I use my quirk on someone, several things happen. The glow of her red eye lit up her face and dominated the darkening room as the sun began to set outside. You see, normally it's more painful than a regular tattoo, and the more detail I put into the tattoo, the more painful it is, but it's also brighter, and the boon is greater. Boon? Izuku asked, raising an eyebrow as Ori pressed her hand onto his bare chest. Her push was subtle and barely there, yet it was enough to guide him to the ground. You saw Tanaka's tattoos, right? The dragon on his chest protects him, or at least it should. It's hard to tell, but my tattoos are more than just tattoos. The last thing he saw before he flipped onto his back was Ori's eager smile. He had several regrets at the moment, but they all paled to the failure he suffered at UA. And on you, they'll be even more. So you're going to be getting my best work yet. Okay, so, can you give me a... He stopped when he felt her straddle his back. You can decide the next one. She leaned forward, her breath against his ear. For now, just be my canvas and you will not be disappointed. It might have been the virgin in him. It might have been his own indecisiveness on what to ask for. It might have been the fact that no matter how bad Ori's personality was, he still thought that she was cute, or it could have simply been the curiosity about what she would produce that led him to nod his head and say yes. A beautiful tattoo. The promise of a second one. And whatever the hell a boon was as well. You know, he started, smiling at the blank canvas he could see across the room. With how our quirks work we might make a... A scream escaped him as he felt her needle press into his back. When she had said it would hurt, he did not think that it would be quite so bad. A light prick maybe, like a shot at the doctor's, maybe a nasty scrape. But this felt like his skin was being burnt and peeled off all at once, only to be stitched back on with a rusty needle. The pain came and went like waves, giving him just enough time to come back to reality before he succumbed to the pain once again. Only the slight touch of Ori's hand that was like a cool ice pack on his burning skin kept him grounded as to why he was here. He was going to get a tattoo. His first tattoo. He would bear through this pain and prove to himself that his quirk was amazing. Still, it felt like it was taking forever. Oh, he heard Ori and felt her pause for a moment. Well, hello there. Can you move your head just a bit? Izuku tried to move his head but found Ori held it tight. Not you, your tattoo. She could talk to his tattoo. It was already moving. He wanted to see it. Thank you, she said sweetly, and the pain resumed. He no longer screamed with the pain, but that didn't mean he could speak either. At some point he had been given a leather belt to bite into to help with the pain. He wasn't sure if it did. Pain and time blurred into one existence of pure suffering that seemed inescapable. And then, it was over. Done. Ori let out a long yawn and stood up from his back. He heard one of her joints pop at least once. Now come on, let's go outside, I want to see him. Izuku could only nod as Ori pulled him up with a firm hand. He barely managed to walk, his shoulders still aching with echoes of pain that might never go away. But as he stepped outside, he saw something on his upper arm move for just a moment. He had a tattoo. He glanced up at the sky. It was orange, just like it had been when he first entered the building, only this time it was sunrise. For her part, Ori looked dead tired. Her already scattered appearance looked even more so, with her white hair a wild and untamed mess and the dumbass on her cheek reduced to a mere smear. Despite how tired he was from the pain and from not sleeping, he never felt better. Was this her boon, or was he just so excited to finally be able to do this? Come on out. He nearly felt his arm fall off as a great white fist grabbed onto his shoulder and pulled itself out. Sparks of blue electricity appeared as the creature landed. A massive gorilla stood in front of them, its pale blue skin outlined by a thick black line that looked like a living brush stroke. Even when slouched over, the gorilla was easily over twice Izuku's height and larger than most of those villain bots he couldn't do anything against. But this guy looked like he could rip those bots to shred with ease. As though in agreement, the gorilla pounded on its chest, a sound that boomed like thunder and sent sparks of blue electricity around him. Well, Ori let out a long stretch as she walked over towards his tattoo. She touched the gorilla with a large smile on her face before she looked back towards him, her red and blue eyes shining in the early morning light. What are you going to name him? Izuku watched for a moment. Did the gorilla recognize Ori as its creator? Were they both the creators? What was his name? Kong. The gorilla shook its head in disgust and made a grunting noise. Alright, so it could have opinions. How about Raijin? Ori offered. Raijin nodded, and Raijin was amazing. By the time Izuku got home, he had barely enough energy to crawl into his bed and plug his phone in. At some point last night it had died. There were countless missed phone calls and texts from his mother. With the last bit of his energy, he managed to text her back. Home safe. Sleep now. He'd deal with her tomorrow. It took not coming home one night for his mother to lose all trust in him. Instantly she assumed the worst, that he started doing drugs, that he was lying to her, that this was his rebellious phase, that he was hanging out with the wrong crowd, that he was kidnapped, and a dozen other make-believe scenarios that appeared in her head. And any excuse he offered was instantly disregarded as a lie. Because it was. The lie he repeated a dozen times was that he had lost track of time walking around because he was still upset, and ended up falling asleep on the train. By the time someone woke him it was already morning. It sounded logical. It sounded like the most reasonable thing in the world. But his mother refused to believe him. Alright. Izuku adjusted the collar of his dress shirt. It felt strange no longer being forced to wear his school uniform, but since he was going to Tokyo U, it was expected that he at least dress the part. Besides, he thought he looked good in a button-down and a set of slacks. On the other hand, his bright red shoes were probably just an interesting fashion statement. I'm going to orientation. He honestly didn't know how much sleep he got last night as he kept getting woken up by random pains in his body, mostly on the bottom of his feet, sometimes his legs or arms. Nothing too bad, but it was just enough to wake him up. It had been like that for the past couple of days. It wasn't his first day of classes, those weren't for another month, but there was a lot he could get from orientation. Like a good dose of pressure in trying to figure out what the hell he wanted to do with his life. It wasn't like UA was the only path to being a hero, there were other avenues he could take, they were just less than ideal. Still, it would have been nice to go to UA. And where are you going afterwards? Inko asked. She moved and adjusted his collar again, somehow making it feel 10 times worse. She stuck out her hand and his tie floated over towards her. And what about your tie? I don't need to wear a tie, Mom. I could just wear a t-shirt and it would be fine. It's just orientation. He pushed her hand to the side gently. And I'll probably eat lunch at campus, and then come home. Inko narrowed her eyes slightly. She still didn't trust him. Well, okay, but, text me if something changes, alright? Especially if you meet some friends there. Ah, my baby's growing up so fast. Inko gave a light gasp, not from her being surprised or anything, but because she thought that was what was cute for moms to do. You might even meet a girl. Izuku rolled his eyes and let out a sigh. That's not going to happen, Mom, now can I go? Yes, and remember to text me where you are. Inko held up his phone and handed it to him. Please. Izuku sighed. I'll try. He really needed to thank Katsuki's mom for talking Inko out of putting a tracking app on his phone. That would have been way too much. It wasn't even like he was even going to do something he shouldn't. Technically, aside from going to a Yakuza place one time for an illegal quirk-based tattoo from a crazy woman that was the very definition of a hot mess, he hadn't ever done anything remotely bad with his life. It was hard to believe that was over a week ago, but if he closed his eyes, he could still feel the sensation of Ori burning, ripping, shredding, and all around inflicting a great deal of pain into his back for the sake of getting a tattoo. And it had been rewarded. Keeping Raijin a secret from his mother sounded like it would have been a monumental task that bordered on the impossible, however, Izuku quickly realized that he could freely move his own tattoos. That made it so much easier to just hide Raijin whenever he wanted, or where Raijin just wanted to be. Currently, Raijin was hanging out on his arm doing tattoo gorilla things. By Izuku have a. The door was shut behind him and he headed towards the nearest station. Thankfully, Tokyo U wasn't terribly far from his mother's apartment, but it was far enough that he might be able to justify moving to a student dorm close by. Things to think about for sure, but more pressing was the great ape currently hanging around on his skin. Having Raijin and not knowing what exactly he could do was killing him. He finally had a tattoo that could do more than just be a neat party trick. He wanted to take Raijin somewhere and just watch him go nuts on something, but the chance simply hadn't come to him yet. He still had school, and now his mother was watching over him like a hawk, not to mention he couldn't just bring out his quirk in public for no reason. He needed to get away, go somewhere where he could summon a giant gorilla and not be judged. Especially once said gorilla actually started to destroy stuff. He didn't get to ask Ori about what the lightning was about. Was that just aesthetics? Raijin's base tattoo had those bits of lightning around him, so they could just be there for show, but what if they weren't? What if Raijin actually had some kind of thunder-based power? How strong was it? What could he do with it? There was something he gleaned from his quirk after getting Raijin, like the connection he felt between him and his tattoos. It was loose, more empathetic than anything, but he could feel that Raijin was just as eager as he was to get out into the world and show off. What he didn't know was whatever the boon was that Ori had mentioned. He didn't feel any different, but she said the dragon on Tanaka's chest was supposed to protect him. How did that work? If a dragon was protection, then what was a gorilla? And wait, wasn't a dragon tattoo only for higher-ups? Wasn't Tanaka just the muscle? Or was that just some myth he picked up from something? Maybe he knew absolutely nothing about Yakuza culture beyond the fact that Tanaka looked like a demon and Ori acted like one. 4x. Orientation was boring as hell. It was just a giant welcome party that went over what the campus had to offer, like the food court, or the gym, or their arts program, or the fact that the college existed. They even had a few alumni giving a speech about how great they were for going to Tokyo U. It just felt hollow. He had dreamed so much about being a hero that he had completely tossed away any other alternative. He had a meeting with some counselor to help him out with that in about 2 hours. The meeting wasn't expected to last longer than 30 minutes. 30 minutes to figure out what he was supposed to devote the rest of his life to. Izuku glanced at the mediocre food that he had absent-mindedly devoured before he leaned back in his seat. At least the food at Tokyo U was pretty good. With a heavy sigh, he leaned back in his chair and stared up at the ceiling. What am I going to, Ori? A pair of pale horns tipped with red and a piercing blue eye that could make the sky jealous greeted him along with a smile that reached her eyes and then some. Yo, if it isn't my favorite canvas. She swooped past him and took the seat across from him with an expert level of grace that had her long black skirt flowing like she was in a dance. She looked completely different and yet the same from when he had last seen her just over a week ago. Her long, snow-white hair was straight and loose, with some of it falling around her horn to cover her red eye again, and part of her smile. She had on a loose white blouse with only the top button undone, and a black vest that hugged her curves tight. Her long black skirt was slanted to one side, showing off just a bit of her long tan boots. You look like you're trying to be a pirate on Casual Friday. Izuku tried not to get caught too off guard by her smile. He could still feel the pain of her quirk. Ha, you're the first one to get that. Ori clapped her hands and put one boot up on the table. Check out these new boots I got. I think they just scream, "Yar, give me your booty." Yeah, they do. Izuku blinked and then shook his head. Wait, what are you doing here? What do you think? She shot her arms out wide and gave a big grin. I'm a student here, art major. Or at least I was, haven't actually taken an art class in a while, but I am next semester. In the meantime, I hang out and eat the food. What about you? What's your major? Izuku just shrugged. Ori snorted and took a bite of her food and hummed before she pointed her finger towards him with a snap. Mood. But hey, you'll find something. Worst case scenario, you go like, business or something. I don't know, you seem smart, but not like computer smart. I think it's the freckles. My mom wants me to be a doctor. Everybody's mom wants their kid to be a doctor. Ori snorted and waved her hand like it wasn't any big deal. She leaned forward, one elbow on the table as she rested her cheek on her palm. He could nearly see the glow of her red eye as her smile grew again. But enough of the boring stuff, have you let Raijin out? How is he? I haven't had a chance to let him out, but I guess he's fine. I think he might be a bit bored. Izuku shrugged and then tapped on the table lightly. I remember you mentioning something about a boon. What's with that? Oh, she stopped smiling and waved her hand like it was no big deal. She moved her hair for a moment and flashed her red eye at him. I mean, apparently the tattoos I make with my quirk are more than just tattoos. I told you about my brother's dragon, right? How it protects him. Yeah, you mentioned that. Izuku leaned forward a bit and then glanced around the food court. Honestly, he had no idea how much of this he should be talking about in public. But, how? No idea, I should have used a better example. She tapped on her chin and then nodded. Oh, right, you saw it right. The cherry blossom tree on my thigh. Yeah, what did that do? Make me tall. Huh. So, like, when I was 15, I was jealous that everyone was taller than me, and then one day I went a little crazy and then gave myself a tree tattoo. Right after that, I started growing, and then before I knew it I was the tallest and bustiest girl in my class. So yeah, cherry blossoms gave me puberty, she finished with a light shrug and then pointed at him. Though, I could have also been a late bloomer. There's also the tattoo on my brother's back, it makes him scarier than normal. But he's already pretty scary. So you're telling me it might be useless? More that it might do anything. I'm not even sure what boon a giant lightning gorilla might give. She squinted and looked at a bit of fruit on her plate. Maybe you'll get more out of potassium or something. I dunno, do gorillas eat bananas? Or is that just like a Donkey Kong thing? Izuku could only shrug. Alright, but, not that I'm complaining or anything, but why a gorilla? Ori hummed and took another long bite of her food. I honestly don't know, just felt like it. I felt like a giant thunder gorilla would look cool and look even cooler once it popped off your skin. It's hard to argue with the results. Izuku nodded. Raijin was more than impressive on his own. I guess I should think about what I want my next tattoo to be, right? Ori's smile grew and her eye flashed a bright red for a heartbeat. Such an eager canvas you are, Izuku. Well, I'll be happy to ink you up again at some point. But before all that, do you want to see what Raijin can do? Yeah, I'd love to, but I don't know of any place that I can really. He stopped when he saw Ori's already massive smile double in size. She loved to hold knowledge over people's heads, didn't she? You know a place. She nodded. On a scale of 1 to walking into a Yakuza hideout, how dangerous is it? An arbitrary 7. Ori shrugged. I mean, it's normally not dangerous or anything. But what do you say? Come on, it'll be fun. It's not like you have anything else to do, right? Izuku opened his mouth to protest, but the smile pulling on his lip and the sensation of Raijin pounding its chest forced him to stop. He wanted this. Sure, but I'll need an excuse from my mom. Why? Ori looked slightly offended. Because I'm on a short leash ever since I came home after spending the entire night out. Ori blinked. Oh, that's my fault, huh? Well, mostly your fault, I guess. You should have come earlier or something. Eri spun around the table and sat right next to him. Here, give me your phone. Before he could object, she swiped it from him, opened the camera app, and pushed herself close to him. Come on, smile. He flashed an awkward and forced smile and Ori took the photo. You suck at smiling, be more photogenic next time, Izuku. She slid back over to her seat and resumed eating. But there, you can send that to your mom and tell her you're going to hang out with this hottie you met at college. That might actually go over well. It did. 4x. Much like Tanaka had done over a week ago, Ori had led him halfway across Tokyo and into the Amagi district, but this time they didn't go to the compound. Instead, he found himself following her as went into a large warehouse. From the outside, there was nothing but silence, but as they walked through the doors and went down several flights of stairs, Izuku began to feel it. A loud pounding bass that got his blood pumping. The cheer of a crowd. And then, the sounds of battle. If stepping into the Yakuza compound had been like stepping into another world, walking down into this fight club was like walking into hell itself. With just a few short steps, his heart was already pounding to match the endless beats that seemed to engulf everything around him. The lights were flashing and the people were closing in around him. There were so many of them, and of so many different kinds. Street thugs, students, businessmen, Yakuza members, and so many more all stood cheering, shouting, and clamoring for the attention of men behind thick glass as they bet on the winners of the fight. Were it not for Ori's hand wrapped tightly around his wrist, he would have been swallowed up and eaten in this place in a matter of moments. Somehow, Ori managed to navigate this crowd with ease, and promptly took Izuku through a locked gate into a more silent area of the underground. He could still feel the pounding of the music, but there was a silence here that could not be ignored. There were more men in suits, a few people that looked like thugs, and more than a few people that looked like they were in the process of counting their teeth. Ori, what are we doing here? Because I don't feel like getting my ass kicked. PFF'd. She snorted and let go of his wrist. Have some faith, Izuku. I know what I'm doing. She looked around and bounced on her heels for a moment before her focus snapped towards a slick-looking man that was wearing a pinstriped black and white suit, complete with the fedora. Ida, over here. Ida, who had been staring at them the whole time, pushed himself off the wall and walked over. A katana was strapped to his back, while he carried another one in his hand like it was nothing out of the ordinary. With an overly pleasant smile on his face, Ida gave Ori a slight bow, his free hand going over his heart while his straight black hair swung freely for a moment. Lady Ori, it's good to see you out and about. Sadly, if you're looking for your brother, he's not why I'm here. Ori waved her hand like it was nothing and then pointed towards Izuku. Ida, this is Izuku. Ida's pale green eyes widened as he turned to look at him. So this is the canvas you mentioned. Again, Ida gave a light bow. It's a pleasure to meet you, Izuku. Yeah, Izuku, this is Ida, he's not as creepy as he looks, he's actually really nice for an old guy. Ida gave a slight glare towards Ori. I'm 28. That's nice. Ori bounced on her heels and looked around the area for a moment. Anyways, Ida, can you keep him out of trouble? Ida finished as he gestured towards Izuku with a slight head tilt. It would be my pleasure. Great. Ori clapped her hands and smiled at both of them. Izuku, I'll be right back, I'm just going to see if there's someone here that Raijin can fight and see if we can put you in quicker. I'm so excited. With that, Ori was gone, bouncing down the long concrete hallway and then around a corner with all the confidence of a kid at a playground. It's been a while since I've seen her so excited, Ida muttered in a subdued voice, his head swaying side to side a bit like a puppet. I'm going to cut straight to the edge with you. Straight to the edge. Was he making a pun? Was it a quirk pun? Why did people make those? Was he supposed to start making tattoo puns now? The slight glint of steel as Ida unsheathed his katana just a hair brought that train of thought crumbling down. Izuku held up his hands and blinked. I'm not going to do anything. Oh, I know. The katana was fully sheathed again. Because if you did, you would have the entire might of the Amagi group bearing down upon you. I didn't realize she was that important. Izuku kept his hands up for a moment as he watched Ida's posture relax. Is she like a Yakuza princess? In a way. Ida gave a slight nod. Her family's story is tragic enough, most of us just want to keep her safe. Something tells me she makes that hard. How observant you are. Ida cracked a smile and glanced down at Izuku. I suppose proper introductions are in order. I am Ida Kurumasa, I'm Tanaka's captain. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Izuku stuck his hand out and met Ida's pale green eyes. It's nice to meet you. This was the second Yakuza he had met that was surprisingly nice. Ori didn't count. He still wasn't sure if she was nice, or just nice to look at. Izuku, Ida took his hand and leaned in close. Midoriya. Was it? Yep. This was the second time that a Yakuza member had reacted to his name. Is there something wrong with my last name? No, it's perfectly fine, it's just familiar is all, but I'm sure you get that a lot, it's pretty common after all. Ida gave a light chuckle and a smile before taking his hand back. It's not. I was the only one in my school. Izuku raised an eyebrow and stared at Ida for a few seconds. I've never even met another Midoriya. They're more common in Osaka, but that is neither here nor. Ida paused for a moment and shrugged. Actually, I suppose it is there, but most certainly not here. Oh, okay. Izuku glanced around and caught a few more glances of the would-be competitors. He really didn't know what to make of some of them. How many were Yakuza? How many were fighters? How many were both? And where was Ori? Hey, Ida, can I ask you a question? Ida raised a very straight eyebrow and nodded slowly. I'll make my answer as straight forward as possible for you. More straight puns. What caused Ori to lose her inspiration? Tragedy. Ida's smile faded and he took off his hat for a moment. You might be too young to remember it, but do you recall the great crusade that All Might and the police led against Yakuza that were being designated as villain groups? Izuku nodded. I've heard about it, it happened when I was really little. That's when those three lost their father. 3. Ida gave a slow nod and covered his face with his hat for a moment. I'm sorry Izuku, but that is not something I have the strength to speak of. And please. A tear slid down Ida's cheek. Do not trouble Ori with your curiosity on this. Izuku swallowed and looked at his feet. Tragedy, huh, and not just once. Ori lost her father around the same time that he did. But, Ida said there were 3 of them, yet he'd only seen Ori and Tanaka. And she lost her inspiration 2 years ago. Something happened to the third one. Great, now he was curious about Ori's family history. Maybe he could get it out of Tanaka pretty easily. He seemed pretty open. Wait, Izuku looked around the area again. Shouldn't we be wearing masks or something? Ida dried his tear and placed his hat back on top of his head. You're thinking of the underground masquerade. That one was based out of Osaka, and had a different set of standards than here. Wasn't an underground fight pit just an underground fight pit? I can see it on your face, Ida hummed and smiled. You see, ours is just a bit safer, in nearly all regards. And we make more money. How? I'm not at liberty to say. Ida nodded down the hall. Ah, here comes an even more excited Ori. Ida gave another short bow and a wink. I trust everything went well. You bet. Ori grabbed Izuku's hand and pulled him along. Come on Izuku, I got Raijin a match. Thanks for watching over him Ida, you want to join us? Tempting though that may be, I'm afraid I'm needed elsewhere. Best of luck to you too. Ida gave a short bow and slunk back into the shadows. Wait, Izuku stumbled for a second as Ori came to a dead stop just to look at him. Just Raijin, not me. PFF'd. Please, you don't look like you can actually fight. She gave a laugh and pushed some of her hair back out of the way, revealing her glowing red eye. There's no way I'd risk scarring up my favorite canvas. She gave him a hungry look that really did a great job of making him feel like a piece of meat, or in this case a hunk of skin. Besides, Raijin qualifies for the heavyweight fights. Heavy. Alright folks. A raspy female voice called out over the speakers. We got a special treat for you tonight. A true heavyweight bout. The cheers flooded over the silence that had once been so prevalent behind the arena. The pounding music stopped and a rumbling took its place. Come on. Ori jumped and grabbed his hand again. This is going to be amazing. Tonight, the champion has returned. From the twisted minds of that pink-haired brother and sister duo. The mechanical menace, the unstoppable bot. They arrived at the top floor of the fighting arena. Lights, wires, and cameras were scattered around the place, and a few more Yakuza guards could be seen up here. Across from him, Izuku saw a large pink-haired man and a much smaller pink-haired girl milling about on a platform just like what he was standing on. Below them, the once small arena was expanding, doubling in size as the crowd moved around, climbing up on whatever they could to get a better look at what was about to happen. The sound of metal scraping against the concrete sounded as something emerged from a pathway into the newly expanded arena. The robot looked like one of the villain bots from the entrance exam had gone through a junkyard and suited itself out with more and more gear before painting over it with a slick red paint job. A massive sword of scrap metal was in one hand, and a shield of hubcaps and slag in the other, while two more grabby arms awaited anyone that got close. The bot was slightly larger than Raijin was, but looked less sturdy. Introducing the new and improved Gladiator bot. That's right folks. This baby's even more deadly than the last time he made an appearance. The crowd cheered as Izuku looked down towards the arena where a blonde-haired woman wearing a biker jacket was having a field day. Ah, so everyone else was crazy here too. And now, before you all dive into a betting frenzy, let's introduce the only thing crazy enough to go up against it. The lights flashed towards them, bringing with them every set of eyes. A collaboration of quirks, a beast yet untested, art given life. Let's hear it for Izuku. Ori shook his shoulders. Let him out. Izuku stuck out his arm and willed Raijin out. He felt the great ape swing into action, its hand pressing on Izuku's arm before his sleeve exploded. Raijin flew through the air, a powerful roar escaping him before he landed with enough force to shake the area. Raijin. The crowd roared and more than a few whistled. The thunderous ape made not of flesh and bone, but ink and lightning. Now then, get ready to place your bets. Because this showdown is set to get started at any moment. On the display, a countdown began as the lights outside of the arena began to fade. Izuku looked at what remained of his sleeve. He probably should have taken it off, or at least rolled it up so Raijin wouldn't destroy it. Was there something wrong with leaving from the palm of his hand, or did that monkey just want to show off? Ori was speechless, her glowing red eye quickly becoming brighter as the lights around them went out one by one, until only the arena light remained, highlighting Gladiator Bot and Raijin. For a few brief moments, it felt like it might be the cover of some B-list action movie with bad CGI, but the roar of the crowd affirmed the reality of the situation. 3, 2, 1, fight. Raijin pounded his chest, and Izuku felt his blood begin to pump as he let out another roar that shook the stadium. Gladiator Bot surged forward, its one massive wheel nearly burning out as it charged, its massive blade and shield at the ready. Sparks flew as the robot swung wide, aiming for a quick victory. Raijin let out a roar like thunder and spun to the side, dodging the blade and letting out a punch that the bot attempted to absorb with its shield. The shield buckled, bent, and warped as a pulse of sparks shot through the bot's arm. With another roar, Raijin leapt towards the sword and brought both fists down onto the broad side of the blade and shattered it. The bot retaliated with a shield slam to the gut, which forced Raijin back. Izuku placed a hand over his stomach. It didn't hurt, but he could still feel that impact. Did he feel what his tattoos felt? That might be his weakness. Gladiator bot didn't relent and came at Raijin with all four of its bare arms at the ready. A barrage of punches slammed into Raijin's body and Izuku felt each one like a light tap on his skin. But Raijin must have felt it more. Raijin roared and slammed both arms down onto the bot's back, then grabbed onto one of its arms. With a thick stubby foot on the bot's chest, Raijin ripped the arm free from its joints, sending wires, sparks, some strange liquid, and gears flying out. But that wasn't enough for Raijin. With another roar of thunder, he grabbed the arm with both hands and smacked Gladiator bot in the head with it. Sparks went flying from all over the bot as Raijin leapt upon it, his large sparking hands grabbing onto the bot's head. The sound of metal tearing and crunching echoed throughout the arena as Gladiator bot's three remaining limbs tried desperately to remove the great ape from its body. With one last roar, Gladiator bot's head was torn off, and Raijin had won his first fight. 4x. It was late by the time Izuku got to his mother's apartment, and he had more than enough prize money in his pocket to do whatever it was that he wanted with it. If he got paid like that once a week, he'd be able to pay his way through college and rent his own apartment. It was so much money, and it was just burning a hole in his pocket, begging to be spent. But on what? A new laptop, a giant meal, better clothes. There were so many things he could spend the cash on, but so few things he actually wanted to buy. Maybe he should just start saving it for something. What on earth did people do with fat stacks of cash they got from an illegal underground fight club? Drugs and alcohol. Neither one of those sounded appealing to him. Considering how he hung out with the Yakuza twice now, that was probably a good sign. Or something. The only thing he did buy was a new shirt on his way home. Hopefully his mom wouldn't notice. He creaked open the door and was greeted by the sound of a dinner long since cooked, though his stomach wasn't complaining at the idea of cold food. Still, it was a bit on the late side and he didn't want to talk to his mother for a number of reasons. Maybe he could sneak some and just hide in his room for a bit. Izuku. The chill in his mother's voice caught him off guard. Where were you? She stood in the hallway, bathed in the dull light that came from their kitchen. His head was down, her entire body looked like she was shaking and he could see the tear stains on her cheeks. He scratched the back of his head. He almost couldn't look her in the eye. But he did. He glared at her, challenging her. I went to the movies with Ori, I texted you, remember? Oh, I see. Her mother's voice stopped shaking as she looked up at him with a firm sadness in her eyes that piled on guilt. She presented her phone to him and a video started to play. So this isn't you. Give it up for. The crowd cheered and the phone zoomed in on him holding out his arm. Raijin. Inko pressed pause as the camera zoomed in on Izuku's face. Same pants. Same shoes. Same him. Same Ori. Different shirt. No use denying it. How'd you get that? That doesn't matter. She stomped her foot on the ground. Why were you there? Tell me, Izuku. Why were you there? Why were you fighting? Where did that gorilla come from? Why can't you just tell me the truth? You want the truth. He shouted and stomped his foot right back at her. The fake gasp of shock she let out wasn't going to stop him. This is your fault. You didn't let me get a tattoo for my quirk. You're why I failed to get into UA. So what did you make me do? He unbuttoned his shirt and willed Raijin to stand on his chest. You made me desperate enough to go to some Yakuza artist and get this done. Mom, meet Raijin. Inko just stared at his chest for a moment, her body was still and lifeless for a few moments. Tears began to fall down her cheeks again. Her voice was small, but it was loud enough. Get out. He didn't need to be told twice. He tossed his phone into the first river he found. This is where I end off. I hope you liked it so far and tell me if you think I should put up the rest of this fanfic. And shout out to Yojimbra for writing this amazing fanfic. Check the out and their other amazing fanfics. And if you felt like it, like the vid to show some support. Comment if you have any fanfics that you believe is underrated and you want to bring more attention to it, and subscribe to keep informed when I drop a new video.